Hey everybody, it's Mr. Kaufman here, putting together a tutorial video to give you some help with lesson 13.5. And in lesson 13.5, as you may recall, we were studying metric units of capacity and mass. All right, so remember, when we study metric units, we're talking about units of measure used by the world. Okay? Remember, the United States of America is a unique country for many reasons, and one of those reasons is because we use what we call customary units. Okay? Our units of measure that we use for capacity are different than what the rest of the world uses. Okay? And we've already talked about those in previous lessons. So today you're going to see words like the following. You're going to see words like liters, and grams, and kilograms, and milligrams, and milliliters. Okay? But just like what we learned yesterday when we were studying metric units of length, we are going to see that converting metric units of capacity and mass is actually quite simple because we're just multiplying by tens. All right, so really quickly before we move on, let's do a quick review of what capacity is. Remember, capacity is the amount that something holds. Usually we think of a liquid. So if I had a mug and inside of my mug I had water, okay, that would be like capacity. And mass is usually thought of as like the heaviness of an object. So if Mr. Kaufman was standing on a scale, and he might not be so happy about his weight right now, maybe, and that scale said 190 pounds, that would be the amount of mass or the amount of weight that Mr. Kaufman has because of gravity pushing down on Mr. Kaufman. Okay, and that's what a scale would measure. Now we know pounds is a customary unit, so instead of pounds, you're going to hear words like grams or kilograms when we use metric. Okay, that's just a quick little reminder for you of what we're going to be using. All right. So let's take a look at number one. Number one says the following. It says, my apologies, I meant to highlight that. What metric of unit will you use to measure your mass? All right. And then the second part of that says the amount of blood in your body. So there's two different metric units that they're asking for. The first one they're asking for is mass. And the second one they're asking for is the amount of blood in your body. Ugh. All right. So if I was measuring first my mass, again, remember, we're going to measure how much weight is pressing down on Mr. Kaufman. Okay? Now, the smallest unit of measure would be milligrams. That would be the smallest unit of measure. Okay? And then after that, we would have grams. And then after that, we would have the largest, which is kilograms. All right. So if I was measuring milligrams, I might measure the little pieces of salt. That might be measured in milligrams, okay? If I was measuring grams, I might measure the weight using little base 10 blocks. Remember those little units that we used? If I was measuring kilograms, I would use much larger units, okay? So the unit that we would use to measure the mass of a person's body would probably most likely be which one? Give me a second to think about that. All right. Well, if you were measuring the mass of your body, I definitely don't think you would want to use milligrams. So the question is, are we going to use grams or kilograms? And I think if we were using kilograms, that would probably be the best. And the reason why you would use kilograms is because humans are larger and heavier objects. So we need, and I apologize for my handwriting, a larger unit of mass. Okay? That would be our reason for using kilograms to measure our mass. Okay? We're larger objects. We have a lot of mass. We have a lot of weight. So we would want to use the largest unit possible. Okay? Now, for the second one, what unit of measure would we use to measure the amount of blood in our body? Okay? So, if we were using capacity, we would use milliliters, and then we would use liters. That's the smallest, and that's the largest. Okay? So now let's think. If I'm measuring how much blood is in my body, and I just told you that I'm a larger body, and humans have larger bodies, so we need to use a larger measurement for mass. Which measurement do you think we should use to measure the amount of blood in our body? A smaller measurement, like milliliters, or a larger measurement? Well, if you said a larger measurement, I would agree. Okay, so I would say liters. And for the same reason, I would say humans are larger organisms. We'll use a fancy science word we learned. And we need to use a larger unit of capacity. Okay? So those are two great answers that I would use to describe the unit that I would use for mass, which again is kilograms, and the unit I would use for capacity to measure the amount of blood in our body, which would be liters. Okay? Excelente, excelente. All right, let me clean up all my mess here. Get rid of my heavy Mr. Kaufman. All right. Now we're going to move on, and we are going to work on problems 2 and 3. And for problems 2 and 3, we are going to be converting units. And when we say convert, it's important that we remember that the word convert means to change. Okay? So I'm going to draw a line across my paper, and I'm going to do number 2 here. And I'll scroll down and do number 3 here in a minute. Okay, so for number 2, I'm comparing the units grams and milligrams. So I'm going to set up my table just like we've always done for all of our other units of measure, whether they're customary units or metric units. And we're going to organize our measurements. So if I'm using grams and milligrams, then I need to pay close attention to this row right here. I know 1 gram is the same as 1,000 milligrams, which means a gram is 1,000 times larger than a milligram. So if that's the case, then I'm going to say 6 grams times 1,000 milligrams equals what? Well, now we're going to use our trusty old shortcut method for multiplication. We're going to multiply 1 times 6, which we know is 6. And then we're simply going to count our zeros. And 3 zeros is like multiplying by 1,000. So we can say 6 grams is equal to 6,000 milligrams. Fantastic. Just like we've been doing with everything else. Okay, I'm actually going to move my 3 and kind of make myself a little bit more room right here since I got room. All right. So for number 3, we are converting liters, I'll use that same line, to milliliters. All right. Now, if we're going to convert from liters to milliliters, then we are going to want to pay close attention to this row, where it says that 1 liter is the same as 1,000 milliliters. Interesting, interesting, interesting. I noticed that milli and milli, no matter what, are times 1,000. I wonder if anybody else in my class noticed that. All right. So I'm asked to find 9 liters is how many milliliters? So I'm going to multiply 9 liters times 1,000 milliliters. And I notice milli means times 1,000, so that's a good observation. And I know that I can multiply just like I did. Oh, Mr. Kaufman, you had a brain fart. I can multiply the basic fact, 9 times 1, which I know is 9. And I can count my zeros, 1, 2, 3. And I know that 9 liters is 9,000 milliliters. All right, so I hope that helps you out with converting metric units of capacity and mass. As you see, it's just like what we've been doing all along. Whether it's customary or metric units, the easiest way is to create yourself a little table here and use multiplication and your special chart, depending on which unit you're using, to help you convert. Take care, and I will see you soon.